My name is Carrie McDowell, and I freaking hate traveling. Hate isn't even an accurate term. I think I'd rather clean my nutsack with jalapeno juice and sandpaper than travel. I hate airports, I hate stewardesses. Yes, I know they prefer to be called air hostesses these days, but I think stewardesses is a nicer term. Mostly, I hate being away from my dogs. Don't get me wrong, I miss my wife too, but we can talk on the phone, Skype, and socialize. I can't talk to my dogs on the phone. I can't walk them on the phone and pet them. The dogs don't care about Skype. I still don't understand why I let my boss send me on these goddamn business trips. Of course, I'm the dumbass who let him talk me into a more senior position in the company. I work as a shop supervisor at EXJ Valve Company in Houston, Texas. I started out working there as a loader. I worked on any machine they needed. Sometimes I welded, sometimes I just turned a wrench. I was and still am one of those guys that will do whatever it takes to get the job done. I started at EXJ 20 years ago after I was laid off from a sawmill in South Dakota. I only lived in South Dakota for 2 years and felt miserable most of the time. The human body is definitely not designed to work outside in freezing weather. I moved there because a friend told me how much money we could make working as loggers. He had already worked there for a year and was making good money. Better than we can make at the refineries here, he told me. He never told me that the guy we were going to work for was a crook and didn't have any licenses. I only found out after my crew was arrested for trespassing on national forest land and cutting without a permit. After 3 days in jail, I was released because my public defender proved that I'd only worked for the company for 3 days and had only been in South Dakota for a week. While we were in jail, my buddy, our boss, and half the team fled to Oregon. I got tired of moving, so I got a job in a sawmill. Business was good. But when the timber industry went down, so did the sawmill business. I was looking for another job when I got a call from my best friend, Jay Kramer. Jay and I had grown up together since we lived a block away from each other as kids. All through high school, we rarely saw each other without each other. Jay had warned me about the lumberjack deal. But to his credit, I never got an "I told you so" from him. Jay, as it turned out, was looking for a job at the same time I was, and he told me about the place he had just applied to. He told me they were just starting out, and it was a great opportunity to get in on the first floor. Think about it, Skippy. He always called me Skippy because he said it was more manly than Carrie. What could be better for a couple of 25-year-olds? Plants? Hell, those guys are always in danger. They're always getting blown up. They're usually outside in bad weather, and unless you're a chemist, you're not going to make much money. We could work inside and have no chance of getting blown up. I thought about what he told me and decided to apply. 3 weeks later, I returned to Houston and applied for a job at EXJ. I was a little surprised to learn that Jay had taken a management position. Growing up, he was just a badass. We both went to community college. I found it tedious and boring, so I dropped out and went to work. He graduated and got some worthless degree in underwater basket weaving or some other pointless shit. I at least tried to enroll in a business management program, but studying and sitting through class after class was not for me. So I found it ironic that he'd be sitting at a desk and I'd be working in the shop. It was fine with me, though. I was always better at working with my hands than Jay. He was always more of an idea man, and I was the one who made the idea happen. So it's fitting that he barks orders he doesn't understand for me to follow. Even more amusing to me was Lauren Graham, the plant manager and Jay's boss. Lauren was a walking contradiction. He was about 100 pounds overweight, but preached that employees should live a healthy lifestyle. He claimed to have an open-door policy for an office he was never in. Also, he was so grossly overpaid it wasn't funny, but would yell if any department wanted to spend an extra dollar to get a better quality tool. There was even talk that the guys who had to go on business trips were forced to stay at Motel 6. He was also a devout Christian, but was also married to a woman named Pam who looked like a star. I didn't care about his faith or his fake-looking wife. What bothered me was the fact that this great judge of men allowed Jay to be around his wife any amount of time unsupervised. Jay was an egregious lover. Every year at the company Christmas party, I observed the same scene. Jay spent most of the evening dancing with Pam. Lauren would sooner or later end up at a corner table with his suppliers and a few of the more obnoxious sycophants. As soon as the booze flowed to Lauren's table, Pam and Jay would disappear. After my 3rd year with the company, I stopped going to parties. It was cheaper to stay home and drink, and I didn't need to dress up. I always found out the next Monday about what I missed from coworkers, and those stories never changed. The year they decided to move the party from the company conference rooms to the banquet room at the Jenkins Hotel, I had to laugh heartily. Lauren was such a curmudgeon, but I heard Pam pushed him for a more lavish setting. Some of us thought she was tired of having fun with Jay in the offices and wanted a proper bed. Jay and I always had a joke that by the time we were 40, we would have entertained every woman in Houston. So you can imagine my surprise when Jay approached me at my 30th birthday party and introduced me to his fiancée, Brandy. Now let me paint you a picture. My height is 6'2", and for most of the last 15 years I have weighed 220 pounds. I didn't exercise until I took my current position. Jay is 5 feet 7 inches and weighs probably 140 pounds. He's small and wiry but moves like a guy twice his size. I always expected that if Jay ever tied the knot, it would be with a 36-24-36 bombshell hottie with an IQ like a turnip. Brandy is at least 5'10" tall. She can't be called thin, but she can't be considered fat either. She's curvy in all the right places and soft where a woman should be. Not the empty-headed pair of boobs that Jay usually chases after, let alone dates. I couldn't wait for him to get out on the golf course to get the story. As it turned out, I didn't have to go to the golf course to get the story. Brandy told me everything. She and Jay met at a management conference in Baton Rouge. As she told it, she was getting off the elevator when this fake plastic whore Barbie ran into the elevator and quickly closed the door. She was about to shout an insult through the closing door when she was knocked down by this bumbling goon who was chasing Barbie, and all her notes went flying. I laughed as I pictured Jay, athletically built like a cat on polished linoleum, chasing Pam around the hotel, while Lauren no doubt bragged to the others about what a great guy he was. She told me that this jerk, she pointed to Jay, who had a "who am I" look on his face, helped her gather all her notes and over a cup of coffee put them in order. They had dinner that night and the next. She had an architecture firm in Conroe, so they could continue to meet after the conference. I wondered how Pam handled being bypassed for a bigger girl. As I spent more and more time with them, I started to like Brandy. Not in a, hey, I want to shake the shit out of you kind of way, but like loving a sister. In a way, she became the sister I always wanted. My real sister was always a total cunt, so I was excited about the idea of having a sister that I could be around for more than 10 minutes a year. At their wedding, I was the third person to dance with the bride. After he danced with Pam once, I took Jay aside and told him that if he ever hurt Brandy, I would beat the crap out of him in a heartbeat. He replied that I had nothing to worry about. His days of sodomy were over. My days, however, were in full swing. For several years, I had fun with anyone who had a pulse. There were weekends when I went to bed with 6 different women. Unfortunately, I also drank too much. Drinking and working was all there was to my life. After 5 years and 3 bouts of binge drinking, everything fell into place. While sowing wild oats, I had one basic rule. I was not to deliberately pursue a married woman. I'm sure 1 or 2 slipped through the cracks, but in general, if I saw even the slightest indication that she was married, I would break off the relationship and run away. I had an epiphany after a Lynyrd Skynyrd song. It was just like the song Gimme 3 Steps. Only the place wasn't Jug, it was Ron's, and her name wasn't Linda Lou, it was Sandra or Mona or some shit. I didn't ask him to give me 3 steps, I took them. What started out as an ordinary Friday night changed my life forever. I was at a bar in Deer Park, dancing with my new acquaintance. I didn't even have time to find out if she was married or not. I knew it was obvious from all indications that she wanted to get laid, and she was paying more than enough attention to me. As we were dancing, I saw a guy heading our way. I knew from experience that when a guy walks through the door and heads straight for a dancing couple, he doesn't tend to cut in. I saw the gun on his belt before he pulled it out. I said to the girl, "I think your husband is unhappy." And her eyes widened and her jaw dropped. She turned to face him, but he was looking right at me. She started to say something to him, and he pushed her aside and pounced on me. He was distracted enough that he wasn't ready for my preemptive strike. I saw him fall to the floor and headed for the side exit. Once in the parking lot, I dashed to the front of the building and jumped into my truck. As I pulled out of the parking lot, a loud squeak sounded over the squeal of tires. It was followed by another. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw a guy with his face covered in blood pointing a gun in my direction. I saw the muzzle flash and heard another gunshot. I swerved into the first right lane I could find and drove aimlessly through residential streets for about an hour. After making sure I wasn't being followed, I pulled into a gas station and got out of my car to survey the damage. There were two distinctive bullet holes on the rear door of my car. When I discovered that a third bullet had ricocheted off the cab just below the driver's side window, I was shocked. It was at least an hour before I could drive home. That's when I realized my days of one-night stand entertainment were over. Call it God, fate, or a scientific word I can't pronounce, but it changed my worldview. I realized that guys are territorial as hell, and up until that point, I had been damn lucky. I swore to myself that I would never work in a bar again. I wasn't sure I'd ever see the insides of a honky-tonk again. A little over 12 hours later, I found myself in unfamiliar territory. For the first time since I can remember, I was home on a Saturday night. I had a crappy little TV with a rabbit ear antenna because I never watched TV. To dispel the boredom, I drank myself into oblivion. The next day, I went out and bought a TV and a VCR, and then splurged and bought a DVD player and some movies. Monday morning, I called and hooked up to a satellite connection. The next weekend went much more smoothly. For the next few years, I didn't go out on weekends. When guys at work asked about my weekend conquests, I only added to the legend. No one seemed to notice that there were fewer and fewer details in my stories. I told them I'd been to bars they definitely wouldn't go to. A couple of times on my birthday, I went out for a quiet dinner with Jay and Brandy, but the rest of the time I stayed home and became a movie buff. One afternoon, I was discussing movies with a guy and overheard the other guy say that he didn't understand how I found the time to watch movies. After that, I started to pay lip service to all the movies I watched. My life changed again 5 years ago. I had a buddy in high school named Terry Jarvis. Terry moved away right before our senior year, and I didn't hear from him until about 3 years after I gave up the bar lifestyle. Terry was the only one who knew I wasn't out every night. He stopped by my house one Friday night and caught me at home. After that, he would drop by my place from time to time for a beer or two. Terry never took much interest in Jay. I think it had something to do with Jay entertaining his cousin, but I never found out for sure. One night after 12 bottles, I told him about my life-changing night and why I wasn't partying anymore. He said he understood completely and advised me to see a counselor. I told him I totally understood and told him to back off. It was enough that he knew about my problem, but there was no way I was going to let some totally screwed-up stranger listen to my story. One Saturday night, Terry came over for a beer and invited me to his little sister Renee's birthday party. Renee was turning 30 years old. She had been married for 6 years to some guy from Missouri, but they divorced shortly after her 28th birthday. He turned out to be a big enough asshole to serve at her birthday party. As I was told, when the bailiff knocked on the door and asked for Renee, she thought it was a stripper for her party. Terry told me that they just stopped getting along and he decided to divorce her. I thought it was funny that he didn't threaten me with retaliation if I tried to get into her underwear. I arrived at the party and was immediately stunned. I expected loudmouthed drunks, giggling pot enthusiasts, and half-dressed harlots, and what I got was grandparents and kebabs. Terry had a huge backyard, but only a small part of it was used. Somehow I found myself involved in a conversation with Terry's grandfather and father about the state of the oil business. Terry's father was a truck driver, and his grandfather was a roughneck until an accident on an offshore rig disabled him. He, like many former roughnecks, thought the guys on the rigs had it too easy now. He was just starting to rant about the sorry state of professional soccer when I excused myself to go get a beer or hang myself, whichever opportunity presented itself first. As I approached the fridge, Terry caught me and said, "Don't worry. After Grandma and Daddy leave, I'll have younger people coming over." "Oh? But I so love hearing about how all men today are wusses," I told him, and we laughed. "Your grandfather never let me down. Did you tell your sister you're throwing a party for her?" He looked a little embarrassed that she hadn't shown up yet. "I think she spent the day in Galveston at the beach. She should be here before too long." I grabbed my beer and went back to listening to the new rant. I thought about the last time I'd seen Renee. She was a freckled kid with braces and pigtails, calling her brother a booger eater or something to that effect. I was deep in my thoughts when the calls of "Hey, y'all" rang out like a redneck's alarm clock. The gate opened and 4 gorgeous women stepped through it. I recognized 2 of them immediately. Renee was still freckled and ponytailed, though her body hadn't stayed true to the shape of a decade ago. She had the kind of bob that she didn't want to leave. The other girl I recognized was Elizabeth Spears. Elizabeth, or Lizzie as she liked to call herself, had always been Renee's best friend. Lizzie was a pot-bellied girl with braces and spots adorning all her clothes. And if you had told me back then that those two would grow up so beautiful that even a blind man would play sports, I would have laughed in your face. I was truly at a loss for words. Renee walked over and greeted her grandfather and great-grandfather. I couldn't do anything but nod at her as she looked in my direction. I tried like hell not to look like a ravenous fool, but I suddenly remembered that I'd only been with my hand for the past few years. A short while later, I was staring at Lizzie across the gathering. Yes, I was staring and most likely drooling. I was so engrossed that I didn't notice Renee standing next to me. Worse, I didn't notice that she was talking to me. Huh, I asked, trying to sound courteous but failing miserably. Renee laughed and replied, I said I could introduce you to her so you wouldn't stare from afar. I laughed. No, it's okay. I just can't get over how much she's changed. And neither have you. I still remember you trying to embarrass my brother and I when we were on your parents' terrace with the Froder twins. Yeah, I could never get your attention back then. Hell, even now I'm having a day and you're staring at Lizzie. I was taken aback. My attention? Since when did she want my attention? I struggled to find the right words when she let me off the hook. I don't blame you. She's hot. Actually, so are you. Yeah? I'm glad you think so. My boyfriend thinks so too. He's a lucky guy, I said with a slight tinge of jealousy. Where did you meet Mr. Lucky? Mr. Lucky? Are we just a little jealous? She looked at me cheerfully. You shouldn't be. You're a dozen years younger than me and the sister of a close friend of mine. Just don't tell me I'm your brother's best friend. If you wanted me, Carrie, you wouldn't stare at me like that. Even the frogs in the grass can see where you're looking. It's okay. She's young, and more importantly, she's lonely and looking. Who says I'm looking? I asked her. Terry told me about you. Come on, Carrie, you've never been the type to hide in a hole. He invited you here to find a good woman. You found her, and all you do is stare at her. Staring at who? I turned to see who it was that asked, and looked into Elizabeth Spear's Arctic blue eyes. I turned to look at Renee. She had one of those I got you good smirks on her face. I was stunned, and my brain was working at 100 miles a second trying to think of what to say. I knew I must look like a total pervert. Thankfully, Renee relented and said, Some pretty girl who was standing over there. Lizzie turned to look where Renee was pointing, and Renee nudged me in the ribs with her elbow. Talk to her, she muttered softly. I must have missed her, Lizzie said with a strange look. Yeah, I think she popped out of the gate or something, Renee said, elbowing me in the ribs again. Yeah, but I gotta go, honey. I have to get up early. I'll see you Wednesday night at your party, Lizzie said to Renee. They both moved towards the gate, with Renee casting glances at me whenever Lizzie seemed to be looking the other way. My next goal was to sneak out of the party before anyone invited me to another party, which I was sure was going to be at the bar. For the rest of the evening, I managed to avoid Renee by going from group to group. Finally, I said goodbye to Terry and his wife Linda and headed home. I figured that after all the beer I'd had, I'd go straight to sleep. One part of me was angry that I had avoided an invitation to the party and a second attempt at hooking up with Lizzie. The other part was glad that I wouldn't have to come up with some lame excuse not to go. I ended up wiping one out by imagining Lizzie and Renee doing a body shot. Monday night after work, I headed to the grocery store. I am always on the lookout for girls I may have rejected during my wild days. As I moved through the aisles looking at the merchandise, I saw Lizzie walking down the other end of the aisle I was in. I figured if I saw her close enough I'd say hi to her, but remembering the upcoming party, I wasn't about to go out of my way to run into her. I was looking through the frozen pizzas, trying to figure out where I would get the most bang for my buck when I saw her again. She was looking at the frozen entrees. I moved down the aisle toward her, looking at the frozen pizza options. When I looked back, I saw some slob in a dirty white wife-beater peeking at her from behind. She didn't seem to pay him any attention. I watched him pretend to look at the diet frozen meals in the display case next to the display case she was peeking into. I say he was pretending because in his cart were several containers of bacon, several bags of potato chips, and a case each of soda and beer. Hey, you should probably be more careful or you'll melt everything in the freezer, he told her. Did he really damn say that? I thought, trying to suppress a laugh. Without wasting a second, she walked over to me and asked, You don't like it when people leave the shit they don't need in the wrong section of the store? I wasn't quite sure what she was getting at, but I played along. Yeah, some people are just too damn lazy. Yeah, honey. Remind me to tell the next clerk that there's a misplaced item in the freezer department that definitely belongs in the fat slobs aisle. I was at a loss for words and started laughing as hard as I hadn't laughed in a long time. The guy in the ladies' beater turned an unusual shade of red and raced on his tail away from the freezer department. Lizzie and I stood laughing together for a few more minutes. One of the guys quickly grabbed his dinner from the TV and stepped aside as if wanting to pick up something from the two of us. I want Chinese food, she said. I glanced at her basket and didn't see anything Asian in it. So, like a dummy, I mumbled, I think the Asian food is in aisle 8. The sounds of laughter filled the frozen food aisle again. This time, Lizzie was the only one who got the joke. She looked at me and stopped. Oh, are you serious? I suddenly realized the situation. Oh, well actually, I didn't think a young hottie would invite an old fart like me to dinner. But I know a place nearby if you don't mind. An old fart? You're not even 40 yet, let alone an old fart. I blushed at her compliment and held out my hand to her. We left our baskets in the middle of the aisle and walked out of the store. We walked into a small establishment not far from my house. I had food delivered to me all the time, so I knew the food there was good. We chatted as we ate, and I kept imagining the sweet and sour sauce dripping off her protruding nipples. Watching Lizzie Spears eat was very sensual, even if only one of us was in the game. As we waited for the check, my brain was already deciding what images I would replay in my mind as I spanked little Carrie. I was brought out of my pre-masturbatory wool gathering by a simple question. So your house isn't too far from here? Yeah, I replied, thinking she was making conversation. I live across the park, about 3 blocks from here. Well, your house is definitely closer than mine, so let's go. A few sweaty hours later, she lay next to me and panted. Do you know how long I've been dreaming about this, Carrie? Well, I imagine you started... She silenced me by elbowing me in the ribs. You asshole. I meant how long I've dreamed of entertaining you. I'll tell you how long. Remember the night you and Terry were vacationing in the old camper? Yes. I remember we vacationed in that camper many times. I'm sure you and Renee did too. Yes, but we never had guests. Lizzie saw recognition flash across my face. Yes, that night. I tried in vain to remember exactly what I'd done, but the image was fuzzy. I remembered that Jessica and Melissa Froder were identical twins. I know that Terry and I had switched places with them several times that night. I may have even traveled around the world with Jess. When you made Jessica scream like a banshee, I didn't know what that meant, but it's been on my mind ever since, and I've wanted it ever since I realized. And Carrie, you were definitely worth the wait. She got out of bed and started to get dressed. You don't have to leave, I told her. Hell, I'll even sleep in the wet. I'll have to leave. I have to get up early and it's a long drive to my apartment. How long a drive? My apartment is in Galveston, so it's a pretty long drive. If you live in Galveston, why do you go grocery shopping in Pasadena? Seriously, who drives 30 miles for groceries? Don't the stores in Galveston sell frozen food? She sighed. Carrie, you're a gorgeous man, but you're just not thinking too fast. I lay there in a daze as she finished getting dressed. She came over and kissed me deeply. I'll see you Wednesday. Sure, I said, not realizing what I had just agreed to. As the door closed, it hit me that she was following me. I suddenly felt stupid. See you Wednesday, I said into the darkness. Shit, it's Wednesday. Renee's birthday. Son of a bitch. I'd been duped. All day long I'd been on edge about the whole birthday thing. My buddy Cliff asked me why I was in La 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 Land the whole damn day. I told him I was invited to an event I didn't want to go to. Just dodge the call, bro. It's simple. When the event's over, you'll say you forgot and your phone's on the fritz. Bingo! Lizzie didn't have my phone number. I didn't have a landline, and my cell phone wasn't listed in the phone book. I figured if she wanted to contact me, she'd have to come all the way from Galveston again. As I drove home, I was feeling pretty good. On the one hand, I might not get another chance with Lizzie, But on the other hand, I wouldn't have to face the crowds at the bar. I stopped by the grocery store again since I hadn't bought anything the day before. When I got home, I turned on my phone and found that I had 3 text messages. I also had 3 text messages and a voice message from an unknown number. The first message had an address in downtown Houston. The next one had the time, 8 o'clock to be exact. The third message read, "Thanks for last night." How the hell did she get my number? I asked the empty room. I suddenly realized who the number belonged to. I dialed my voicemail and was greeted by Lizzie's pleasant voice. "Hi, handsome. I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of calling my cell phone from yours while you were in the bathroom last night. I texted you the address and time of Renee's party, so I'll see you there. Oh, and Carrie, I can't wait to see you." Damn Cliff and his advice. Cliff has obviously never encountered a person as driven as Lizzie. I spent a sleepless night trying to figure out how to avoid the party and failed miserably. That day was the first time I had ever taken a day off from work while I was there. I eventually fell asleep, but around 10 I was awakened by Quiet Riot's song. I was about to curse the bastard playing music while I tried to entertain Catherine Zeta-Jones when I realized I could hear my cell phone ringtone. I hit the answer button and tried to say something intelligible, but could only mumble something resembling English. "Carrie? You sound like you just woke up." "Not yet. In a little while. Do you want me to call you back later?" I finally realized I was awake and talking to Lizzie. "No, babe. I just had a rough night and I fell asleep a little while ago. You called me baby. Now I'm all worked up. You're not sick, are you? I'd hate for you to miss tonight's party. I'm so excited to see you." I almost played the card she dealt me and told her I was too sick to go, but I heard the deep disappointment in her voice and told her I would come. She let out a joyful squeal and a kissing sound and hung up. I fell asleep immediately and dreamed of an endless string of maniacs with guns while I danced with Catherine Zeta-Jones. Finally, waking up around 1:30, I watched TV. There were cheating spouses on Jerry Springer. After a few hours of stultifying daytime television, I showered and dressed for the party. You go without fun for a few years and then you foolishly hit on the first chick you see? I have no idea why, but my inner monologues always sound like a bragging high school senior. Maybe I was whipped. For the first time in my life, a girl was pursuing me. I've pursued and participated in too many failed relationships to count. In my time away from bars, I never once thought of any of the women I'd slept with over the years. Not even the one that almost got me killed. And then there was Lizzie. 29 years old, smart, funny, and damn attractive, she wanted me, she haunted me, and occupied most of my thoughts. Was I in love? Not yet, but it didn't take long for that to happen. I was also sure the feelings were mutual, even though I was past 4 and a little softer in the middle. I got to the club a little before 8. As I got out of the car, I heard a rumbling bass from the sound system. Looking around, I didn't see Lizzie's Miata anywhere. I walked to the front door, where a greasy-haired guy in a cheap suit asked for my ID. He examined it, nodded his head toward the door, and told me to enjoy my vacation. As soon as I walked through the door, smoke, pulsing lights, and loud trashy music washed over me. I usually have classic or southern rock playing in my truck or at home, so I'm not familiar with loud shit with its electronic squealing and spacey sounds. The place was packed with assholes of all stripes. I expected to see a crowd like this on a Friday or Saturday night. It made me wonder if any of these people had jobs. I spotted Renee at the other end of the floor and started making my way through the sea of tattooed guys and dressed-up little girls. Once again, I was reminded that my youth was ancient history. Almost every bastard in this place had more metal sticking out of his body than my truck. I was somewhat comforted by the fact that I'd never visited a bar like this and was unlikely to encounter any ghosts from my past. As I made my way through the squirming masses and laser lights, I found a surprised Renee. She was saying something, but from 3 feet away, I couldn't hear her over the rumble of boom, 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 boom that seemed to permeate the air. "I didn't expect to see you here," she shouted in my ear. "I didn't expect to be here either," I shouted back at her. "How did you even know?" And then a surprised expression appeared on her face. "Lizzie told you, so she—" The expression on my face must have confirmed her thoughts. I couldn't read the expression on her face, but she paused, about to say something. I noticed her attention was on me and turned to see what had caught her attention. I was at a loss for words. I saw Lizzie walking through the parted crowd. It seemed like every jock in the place was trying to talk to her as she walked by. A couple guys who approached her only got a dirty look. I can't blame them for pouncing on her. She was definitely the epitome of beauty. She walked right up to me and kissed me. All the dreams of the other men in the place died. You could almost hear the air coming out of their egos. I'm so glad you came, baby. I've been waiting all day for this. She turned to greet Renee. Then she and Renee started talking. I couldn't understand anything from their facial expressions, and I certainly couldn't hear a damn word they said. After their conversation, everyone in the group moved to an area farther away from the dance floor. It was less crowded and they could talk. Yelling still had to be done, but there was no need to invade personal space. Everyone was drinking and having fun. After a few beers and a shot of Jack Daniels, I decided I could handle the dance floor. I really couldn't dance like everyone else, but it didn't seem to matter. Lizzie pressed herself against me with her whole body, and I just moved with the booms like everyone else. As we danced, I caught a glimpse of a guy approaching quickly. He walked over and patted Lizzie on the shoulder, and the world froze in slow motion for me. I saw, or thought I saw, him reach into his back pocket. I know a lot of guys keep their guns in their back pockets, so when the voice in my head yelled, "Run, Twitter-patiated twit!" I obeyed. Before I realized I had reacted, I was out the side door and in my truck. I was breaking traffic laws left and right trying to get out of the neighborhood. I kept hearing a strange sound. It was a rapid buzzing followed by a zinging sound. I mentally counted how many times I heard it. 8 times. The guy must have had a semi-automatic to fire 8 bullets at me. I drove a few blocks away and then got on the freeway. I was already flying down the freeway when the sounds came again. Shit! He's chasing me. I didn't know who this guy was who had the audacity to shoot at me on a busy freeway, but I knew there was little I could do to stop him. Then the shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started. By my count, there were 16 holes in my truck. Call the goddamn pigs! Yes, the police would stop him. I reached for my cell phone and was about to dial 911 when I noticed I had 2 missed calls. I'd have to deal with them later, since getting this fool to stop trying to kill me was a higher priority than buying Amway or donating to a cop relief fund, although a cop on the line begging for money would be better than no cop at all. I was about to hit the 9 button when the phone rang. It was an incoming call from an unfamiliar number. I pressed the talk button and shouted, "I'll call you back. I have to call the police to stop this asshole shooting at me." I disconnected the call, and a sudden thought struck me like a George Foreman punch. I steered my truck across 2 lanes and onto the freeway. I stopped at a fast food place and got out of the truck. I didn't find any holes. I sat back down and sat there shivering. The buzzing of the phone brought me back to reality. I answered it to hear a distraught Lizzie. "Renee said you got shot?" "What the hell, baby? Are you okay?" "Where are you?" "Yeah, I'm fine. It was just a false alarm. I'm on my way home. I'll talk to you later." I got out and started the car. I must have sat with the car running too long because an employee came out of the restaurant to see if I needed help. I assured him I was fine and drove back to the feeder and then down the highway toward home. A half hour later, I made it home. I slipped out of my clothes and put on some comfortable shorts. I grabbed my bottle of Jack and sat down on the couch. I turned on the TV for noise. I didn't watch it. I just wanted to not feel completely alone when I was drunk to the point of unconsciousness. I felt stupid and humiliated. How could I mistake the buzzing of a cell phone for the thumping of bullets? How could I look Lizzie in the eye again? I wondered if I should go get a bottle of Jack. I weighed all the options and decided that Jack would be enough for me, mainly because all the liquor stores were already closed. I was drunk but not yet passed out when someone started banging on my door. My first fear was that someone had called the police because I was acting crazy. I walked to the door, ready to come up with any excuse the police would buy into. When I opened the door, I saw not Johnny Law, but Lizzie, who still looked awesome in her red dress. I opened my mouth to apologize when she jumped into my arms and hugged me tightly. I couldn't get a word out as she apologized over and over again. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. She was ashamed of herself for pushing me to go to the bar after I had gone through the trauma. She told me that Renee had told her what had happened to me, and that the group that had gathered at Renee's party had agreed that I had PTSD. "Renee's boyfriend is a therapist," she said. He works with a lot of guys who came back from Iraq and helps them deal with PTSD. He's agreed to talk to you tonight when you have some free time. Here's his card. She held out the business card to me, but my eyes were too cloudy to read it. I wish I'd known about this sooner, Lizzie continued. I could have been more attentive and helped you avoid a panic attack? She pressed up against me and kissed me. I think this part of the evening is coming sooner than I had planned, she said. The next day, we both excused ourselves from work. When she left the next night after dinner, we agreed to meet on Saturday. Soon we started meeting every Saturday. 3 weeks later, we were spending Friday and Monday nights with each other. We spent the entire Memorial Day weekend naked and sweaty. While our Texan friends grilled brisket and ribs, we performed the Kama Sutra. 4th of July weekend, we got dressed up and spent the day at Jay's house. Lizzie and Brandy got along great, and Jay was finally happy that I was dating the same woman. Brandy even remarked that she was glad I was settling down. I was impressed that Jay managed not to let it show. Maybe I wasn't the only one who had changed. The rest of the summer, we spent more and more time with Jay and Brandy, either at my house or Jay's. We traveled to Galveston a few times. Lizzie's condo was only a block from the beach, so we didn't have to find parking on a busy street. Of course, hurricane season in late summer made people nervous. Many old-timers were betting that Texas would suffer. Many said we were overdue. Every time a tropical storm popped up, people prepared for the worst, either an influx from Louisiana or having to flee on their own. Labor Day weekend was somewhat overshadowed by the approach of Hurricane Gustav. Many people from Louisiana streamed into the Dallas area to escape its wrath. We received some rain and wind from the hurricane, but it was nothing more than a normal thunderstorm. A week later, we learned of the devastation Hurricane Ike had wreaked on Haiti. Most meteorologists predicted that the brunt of Ike would hit Florida or New Orleans. However, most Texans were watching cautiously. On Monday, there was a 20% chance that Ike would hit Houston. By Thursday, authorities informed Galveston residents that they should leave the city, and Lizzie came to me to stay until the storm was over. On Friday, authorities informed Galveston residents that it was highly undesirable to remain on the island, and many neighborhoods below sea level were evacuated in anticipation of storm surge. Stores were emptied and many residents left. On Friday afternoon, Houston residents were told to stay put because it had become too dangerous to flee. My parents called me from Dallas Friday afternoon and asked if I could come to their home and make sure everything was still okay. They had left their house 4 days ago and had rented a hotel room for 2 weeks. I laughed and told them that no one is allowed in Galveston, much less on the Bolivar Peninsula. Mom just sighed and said she hoped everything would be okay. Friday night, Lizzie and I went to bed listening to the wind howling outside the window. I woke up every now and then during the night, hearing the shutters banging and the rain hitting the walls of my house. After waking up at some point, I realized that the house was unusually dark. I could still hear the storm raging outside and wondered how long it would be until morning. I tried to sleep some more, but soon gave up. I slipped out of bed, leaving a sleeping Lizzie under the sheet. I went to look at the television and found that the power was out. The battery-powered radio informed me that Ike had made landfall around 2 in the morning, had already moved inland and was weakening. The reports were bad. Someone reported that the piers at Galveston were destroyed and that the storm tide was at least 12 feet on the Bolivar Peninsula. I did not go to bed that night. After the storm, we were without power for 5 days. I stocked up on enough food to last a month. We received ice and water daily from various relief groups. Most of the people in line for ice and water had a dazed look on their faces. A few days after Ike passed, Lizzie and I tried to drive to her house to see what was left, but we were turned back by the authorities, saying the highway was impassable. It was another 4 days before we could get to Galveston, but by then, we had already seen the news reports and aerial shots of the devastation. We also heard about the missing people from Port Bolivar. They had rescued over 100 people and were known to have left over 100 more calling for help when the Coast Guard suspended flights. I was glad that my mom was an anxious person and made my dad flee early. When we were finally allowed to see Lizzie's apartment, we found that she was gone. In its place was a huge pile of rubble, and the keel of an overturned yacht protruded from where her living room had been. Lizzie's office was no better. She worked in a boarded-up building overlooking the seafront. It was painted bright yellow with green trim and white accents. It fit in well with the overall motif of local businesses. Old-fashioned shingles communicated the name of the establishment. Now the cheery yellow facade was gone. All that remained was the front entrance plaza, which was tiled toward the street. I hugged Lizzie as she mourned her losses. Among the wreckage of her apartment, we found nothing that could be salvaged. I was glad she'd figured out to move all of her irreplaceable belongings to my house. While searching for her boss to determine a plan of action going forward, we found out he was one of hundreds of missing persons. His body was found 2 weeks later in the ship channel, still in the pajamas he went to bed in that night. My parents' house on the Bolivar Peninsula was also wiped out. When I was finally able to get to their property, all I could see were the supports. I took a few pictures and drove back home. I looked around and tried to make sense of it all. It was only a month ago that I was there. Mr. and Mrs. Garrett were painting their house a serene blue. Mr. Preston was cleaning his car, and Mrs. Preston and their youngest daughter were tending to the flower beds. The new people who lived directly across the street were taking measurements and planning the landscaping. Now, as I looked around, all I saw were fallen trees, empty lots, and washouts. More than 100 people were reported missing, and I hoped that no one I knew was among them. Life went on as usual. Mom and Dad had heard from their neighbors, and they were all safe. They were all homeless and waiting for FEMA to stop stalling. Lizzie decided not to try to get help from FEMA when I suggested she move in with me. The move was not difficult. All of her possessions were already at my house. She was able to buy the rest of the necessities with the money she received from her renter's insurance. She quickly found a job near the Johnson Space Center, and my job went south as we had to deliver spare parts to damaged refineries. By Halloween, our lives were back to normal. I proposed to Lizzie on New Year's Eve at Jay and Brandy's party in front of everyone. She said yes, and we set a wedding date for June. We got married the first weekend of June on the beach in Galveston. It looked strange without the piers, but some of the buildings were being restored and life was quite normal. Shortly after we returned from our honeymoon cruise, I came across an offer on a house for sale in Seabrook. The house had been damaged in the hurricane and was selling for pennies. After touring the house with a contractor friend, I bought it and spent every spare minute over the next few months renovating it. We moved in at the end of August and settled in nicely. We were able to cut 30 minutes off the commute for Lizzie and add 5 minutes for me. All was well and fine until 2 years ago when Jay called me into his office. "Carrie, why are you still working on the floor?" he asked as I walked into his office. "Because Lauren just won't let me have his job," I replied with a smarmy look. "Seriously, haven't you ever thought about trying to move up in the company?" "Jay, you know me. The only reason you and I are in contact is because of our history. Management doesn't like me." He then zeroed in on me. "Carrie, I'm going up another notch. I'll be just below Lauren, and all floor managers will report to me. I want you to take one of the new floor manager positions." Why do I get the feeling that a big member is about to enter the conversation? "This position requires more traveling. This position requires more traveling." Those words echoed in my head the rest of the day and all the way home. I already had to travel at least once a year because every salesman had to play service technician from time to time. I even took advantage of the fact that Renee's therapist boyfriend helped me enough to let me go to a bar or two with the other guys from work. On the way home, I stopped and bought 12 bottles of Bud. Lizzie saw the beer and said, "Uh-oh? Did we have a bad day at work, my sweetie?" I walked over to her and kissed her. "Yes, I was offered a promotion." "Yay, so a beer in honor of that." "Not really. I'm not sure I like the offer." I then told her about my conversation with Jay. "Traveling is fun, honey. I don't know why you don't like it. If it didn't mean being separated from you, I'd find a job that required more traveling." "Yes," I said. "Traveling is good when you go to places like New York or Milan. And I go to holes like Prudhoe Bay in Alaska and Chum Creek in Alabama. The only scenery I see in my travels is pipelines and sweaty assholes with ass cracks showing." "Well, I think you'll make a manager, and you'll sweat less coming home in the evenings." "As long as you don't make me sweat," I said, looming over her. She squealed and ran up the stairs, and I rushed after her in pursuit. The next morning, I told Jay that I accepted the job. To this day, I regret agreeing. I found that the only thing better than groping at TSA was the financial parsing that Lauren's brother and Walt's accounting manager subjected you to when you turned in your expense report. I once had to stand there and explain why an extra cup of coffee showed up on my expense report. "I bought a service tech a damn cup of coffee," I said to Walt. Then I pulled 4 quarters out of my pocket and slapped them on his desk. Don't worry about it, Wally. This cup is on me. That day ended with me leaving work after Lauren and Jay gave me a requiem prayer for acting stupid with Walt. In the evening, Jay came to my house as I was looking through the job search ads to beg me to come back. I came back the next day. The next time someone was to take a trip, they should have read a list of rules for spending company money on the road. At least I knew that if I was on the road and a problem arose at home, Jay's help could be counted on. On my last trip, the valve on the toilet bowl jammed and the bathroom flooded. Lizzie called me in a panic and I told her I would call her dad and have him fix it. Her father had a hard time with the plunger. Dad wasn't home, so I called Jay. He said he would go and help Lizzie clean up. I called Lizzie back and told her help was on the way. In the evening, when I called Lizzie, she looked tired but told me that Jay was a godsend and helped clean up all the water. When you hang the title of manager on a guy off the floor, it's like gelding a stallion. The mayors or roughnecks want nothing to do with you. In their opinion, you have crossed over to the other side and are no longer trustworthy. Plus, you feel like an asshole if you have to cave in to a guy for doing something you yourself have been doing for years. Studs or other managers don't look at you as an equal. At least Lauren and Jay had the foresight to put me in charge of a different group of guys than the one I had worked with before. But unfortunately, that group had the highest number of failures in the field, so I was tasked with improving that. For the first 6 months, I was immersed in learning the processes used in the day-to-day operations of my group. I immediately tried to improve several tasks that I thought were silly and useless. This led to me running into engineers on an almost daily basis. Finally, one day I told Lauren and Jay that if they wanted me to appease the eggheads, I would tender my resignation right on the spot. I knew that design engineers didn't like people poking holes in their processes, but most of them didn't know much about how things were done in the workplace. By the time all was said and done, I had an engineer who became the liaison between me and the rest of the engineers. Lauren also, albeit grudgingly, gave me carte blanche to look at the budget, figuring that whatever I spent on fixing problems in the plant would lead to fewer failures in the field down the road. Just when I started to really get going, someone decided I needed to review more field failures to make sure I was implementing the right fixes. Over the past year and a half, I've been sent out of town at least once a month and sometimes twice. But this trip really pissed me off. Jay always smirked when he gave me orders for business trips. I think he just enjoys being able to inconvenience me. This time was different. Since Hurricane Ike hit in 2008, we've been fortunate enough to avoid storms with a big name. It was scary a couple times, but nothing that caused people to evacuate. But for some reason, people were on edge after Tropical Depression. 147 formed 2 days earlier in almost the same place where Ike formed in 2008. It moved slowly, but meteorologists kept a close eye on it. A few days later, Tropical Depression 147 grew into Hurricane Kate. I told Jay I wasn't happy to be sent back on the road so soon. It had been 3 days away from home when I was uncomfortable. He countered that the Kate was still in the South Atlantic and probably wouldn't make it big, and if it did, it wouldn't make it to Haiti by the time I got back. You'd better have hired a replacement for me by the time I get back, I said, snatching the itinerary out of his hands. I intended to hold out long enough to pay my travel expenses and then look elsewhere. He didn't follow up by asking me to change my mind, so either he thought I was joking or he didn't care. When I landed in Fairbanks 2 days later, Hurricane Kate was already bearing down on Haiti. I smiled at the thought that Jay might have to travel there to help our staff repair the damage. I knew it wouldn't be me. I had already gotten a job offer from EXJ's biggest competitor. It would take longer to commute to work, but at least I would get paid more and not have to drive. I had already worked with the foreman in Fairbanks several times. He seemed surprised that EXJ was sending someone again. I don't know why you guys are here. You guys have all seen these failures before, he told me. I don't know either. I just looked at their kit 3 weeks ago. It would be cheaper to just send the failures back to you to look at them instead of flying here all the time. Maybe my shift manager will implement that, I thought. In my hotel room that evening, I turned on the news and learned that Kate had devastated Haiti. The storm was already a Category 3 and was predicted to skirt Cuba and possibly head for Mexico. I called home, talked to a sleepy Lizzie, and then went to bed myself. The morning news was a little disappointing. Kate had changed course during the night and was predicted to crash into Cuba. According to the new models, it was supposed to hit northern Mexico. I went and spent a boring day watching the guys change valves and engines. In the evening, the news was even worse. Kate was hitting Cuba, and now NOAA had opened up the possibility that she might be headed for the Texas coast. I cursed Jay, dialing Lizzie's cell phone number and getting no answer. I figured she was already asleep. I tried calling her in the morning and still no answer. After figuring out the time difference, I realized she was probably at work. I then set out for my last day of boredom in Alaska. I spent most of the day thinking about the fact that if I ever went back to Alaska, I would have to bring my fishing gear with me. In the evening, I called home again and got no answer. I tried calling on the landline and got no answer either. To say I was worried would be an understatement. My next step was to call Jay. Just as I was about to call him, my cell phone rang. The caller ID indicated that it was Mrs. J, since my phone had Brandy's cell listed. I was able to answer in a calm voice. "Hi, Brandy." "Carrie, have you talked to Jay lately?" There was concern in her voice. I was just about to call him. "I've been trying to reach him for the past 2 days, but I haven't gotten an answer, and Susie said he didn't show up for work today." An alarm bell rang in the back of my head. "I can't get through to Lizzie either," I told her. "I was going to have Jay stop by and check on her." "Where are you, Carrie?" "I'm stuck in glorious Fairbanks, Alaska until tomorrow." "Wait, you said Susie told you that Jay didn't show up for work, so does that mean he's not home?" "I don't know. I'm in Baltimore right now and I'm supposed to be here until Friday, but because Kate might hit Houston, my boss assigned me to Denver tomorrow to wait out the storm." "Denver? Why don't you fly home?" "He said the airports are threatening to close. He wants me away from the East Coast in case the hurricane heads that way. He figured Denver would be safer than anywhere else." An icy chill ran down my spine at the thought of not being able to get home. I couldn't reach Lizzie and Brandy couldn't find Jay. For a brief second, I wondered if Jay and Lizzie were together, but I immediately put the thought out of my mind. Lizzie and I had a great marriage and an amazing life. "I have to fly out of here in the morning," I told Brandy. "I'll call you as soon as I hear anything, assuming I make it home, of course." "Good luck, Carrie, and thanks." We said love you to each other and said goodbye. I turned on the Weather Channel and watched as a gorgeous reporter was doing her report from the amusement center on the pier in Galveston. She reported that evacuations were underway as a precaution, but were not yet mandatory. I took a nap between 8 and 11 o'clock. I got up, showered, and packed. At midnight, I drove the rental car to the airport and checked in for my flight home. I was irritated and getting more irritable by the minute while the asshole at TSA was dealing with me. Finally, at 25 to 2 a.m., the plane was in the air and I said goodbye to Alaska. I planned to come back here someday to fish and enjoy the natural beauty of the place. As I went to bed, I dreamed of making love to Lizzie on the grassy riverbank, in between bouts with salmon in the crystal blue river. My dreams of salmon were broken by the ringing of cabin bells, followed by the ringing voice of our intrepid captain. "Friends, we are approaching Seattle. Local time is 5:45. The weather is calm and cool, 68 degrees, and the sky is clear." He thanked us for choosing their brand and wished us a good time in Seattle. I hoped that my stay in Seattle would not last longer than the 3-hour stopover required by my itinerary. A quick check with the gate agent assured me that all flights to Houston were currently on schedule, but she advised me to keep my eyes open as the weather was rapidly deteriorating. I went to the airport lounge and had a coffee laced with Irish whiskey. No one seems to give a damn at the airport if you're chugging alcohol before most people are even out of bed. I had 3 hours to kill time, so I figured the lounge was the most appropriate place. I usually like to sit at the gate and watch the action on the tarmac, but today I wanted to sit and watch TV. One of the TVs was showing a meteorologist who was being pummeled by the wind and driving rain, and he was shouting into a microphone that he could see destruction all around him. A few minutes later, it appeared that he was in Florida. During the night, Kate had struck the Keys and Cuba Islands. I tried calling both Lizzie and Jay, but neither line was answered. I called Jay's office and told him to call me ASAHFP as soon as absolutely humanly possible. I even called Lauren's office and left him the same message. Lauren called a half-hour later and said they were closing the plant in the afternoon until the storm passed. He also said Jay hadn't called once in the last 2 days and was facing disciplinary action. Even managers aren't immune to the no-call, no-show rule, he said. Figuring I had about 45 minutes left, I paid the bill and headed for the gate. The status board for Flight 7706 to Houston still said it was on schedule. It seemed like it took forever before we were called to board. I breathed a sigh of relief as we were pushed back off the runway and the captain started the engines. I had flown out of Seattle many times over the past year, and I don't think I had ever seen the sun shine there. The city looked very peaceful in the early morning sun. I dozed off again, but woke up about an hour into the flight out of Houston. We hit turbulence, which was not unusual for this leg of the flight. As we approached Bush Intercontinental Airport, I noticed heavy northbound traffic. As far as I could see, the southbound lanes were fairly clear. I knew that in the event of a mass evacuation, even the southbound lanes would be diverted to the north. This was decided after so many had gotten out of Ike's impact with such difficulty. As we exited the plane, we were told that all passengers heading to Galveston needed to contact the authorities beforehand. As I walked to baggage claim, I heard stories of people getting into fights over tickets for northbound flights. Several airlines were preparing to suspend operations due to empty return flights. I packed my bag and headed to the transportation level to catch a shuttle to the parking lot. Lauren refused to pay for us to park in decent parking lots, so I always demanded about half of what I paid for parking. This time I decided I was going to demand the full amount. What could he do? Fire me? I called Lizzie and Jay again and got no answer. I called Brandy and left a voicemail saying I was back in Houston and would get back to them soon. I picked up my truck and was soon speeding down the freeway. The traffic was not as heavy as usual, and even less as I pulled onto the highway heading south. As I pulled onto the street leading to Seabrook, I was stopped by a police officer. He asked if I lived in the neighborhood. I pulled out my ID and showed him. "We are wary of looters since most of the neighborhood has been evacuated," he told me. "Is there an evacuation order?" "Not yet, sir, but I'm sure it will become mandatory tomorrow. Right now, it's just a recommendation." 3 cars with trunks passed by, and I said, "Looks like a lot of people are following that advice." "Yes, sir." "I plan to leave as soon as my shift is over." "Be careful, sir." As I drove the remaining 8 blocks to my house, another dozen cars passed by, leaving the neighborhood. I pulled into my driveway, figuring I'd put the car in the garage later. I noticed my neighbor Bob Sandoval stowing things in a small U-Haul trailer. "So soon, Bob?" shouted I to him. "What happened to that Aztec spirit?" "Hey, Mac." He called me Mac because his wife's name was Carrie, and he thought one Carrie giving him a hard time was enough. "Yeah, I'm running away, kid. I hope you don't need a U-Haul truck, because that's the last one I could find in Harris County. I've got 5 more minutes, and then we'll head to Austin to find a hotel." "Hey, Bob, have you seen Lizzie in the last 2 days?" "No. To tell you the truth, I haven't even seen a light on in there. Maybe she's gone to her parents' house." "Damn me. Why didn't I think of that?" "It's called Mac's rectal cranial inversion." "Never heard of it, Bob." "It comes from not pulling your head out of your ass." Bastard. Bob was always catching me on shit like this. I was just about to say something when Carrie and their little daughter Michelle came out of the house. "Hi there, me and Mini-Me," I addressed the ladies. "You're silly, Mac," the 7-year-old girl in pigtails said, giving me one of her million megawatt smiles. "Hi, Me," Carrie said. We called each other Me. "Have a safe trip, guys, and I'll see you in a week or so," I said to Bob and Carrie. "You too, Mac," Bob said. "Are you going to go to your great-daddy's cabin?" "That's my plan. But first I've got to track down my beautiful half." "Good luck and take care of yourself, Mac." I waved them off as Carrie and Michelle climbed into their Blazer, and Bob went back to make sure the house was locked. I chided myself for never bringing up Lizzie's parents. Brad and Teresa Spears had a house in Katie's neighborhood in Houston, and they were most likely out of harm's way. I unlocked the front door and, barely crossing the threshold, realized I hadn't used my key. The door was unlocked. My irritation was tempered by the fact that of my 4 dogs, only Lucifer had come to greet me. Ginger, King, and Bubby were nowhere to be seen. Once upon a time, Lizzie and I had 1 dog. Lucifer, named for his ability to get into trouble when he was a puppy. Lucifer is a Boston Terrier, and he stuck to me like glue. We got Bubby from neighbors who were getting divorced. None of them had time for him. I always played with him over the fence. One day while I was playing ball with Bubby, his owner Allison came outside. As she marched across the yard, I thought she was going to say something about me playing with her dog. You and Bubby seem to be getting along pretty well, she said to me. Yeah, I guess I do, but I haven't met a dog I don't get along with yet. Listen, Jeff and I are selling the house, and when I move, I won't be able to take Bubby with me. It would do my heart a lot of good if you would take him in with you. Will you do that for me? I won't do it for you, I said, and saw her face lower. I will do it for him. I can't bear the thought of him going to the orphanage. Half an hour later, I was playing with Bubby in my own backyard. Do they know their dog is here? Lizzie asked when she came out to tell me it was time for dinner. She knows anyway, I answered her. I then explained why the beautiful gray and white pit bull was with me. She was a little offended that I had taken the dog without consulting her, but understood. From now on, I will consult with you before getting new dogs, I said with 2 thumbs up like a scout. If there's a place in hell for people who break their scout oaths, that's where I'm headed. I'd forgotten to consult her when the woman who drove the tacos offered me a German Shepherd puppy named King. And she was out of town when I came across a stray Rottweiler named Ginger. Although she was here when I put up search ads and put an ad in the paper looking for Ginger. After a month, she agreed and we had 4 dogs. Yes, the dogs eat a lot and poop a lot, but I spent a lot of money and time training them. The big dogs are trained to let a stranger into a room, but once they are in the room, the dogs block their exit until I act up and Lucifer just plays badass. Even Lizzie can't call them off. For some reason, they don't respect her, and that's something I plan to work on with them. Terry happened to find out about it when we were watching the game on TV. He went to the bathroom. I forgot to call the dogs to me when he left the room. When he came out, there were 4 grinning canine teeth staring back at him. I laughed and called them to me, but was assured that they would keep any intruder trapped until I arrived and dealt with the situation. As I knelt down to pick up Lucifer and greet Daddy the way he likes to, licking my nose 3 times and then nuzzling my chin, I noticed Lizzie's robe lying in the middle of the foyer. Before I could get alert, a howl came from the top of the stairs. Looking up, I saw Bubby at the top of the stairs. I was about to call him to me when I heard Lizzie calling for me. Carrie, can you call the dogs off? They locked me in the guest room. I almost did, but something stopped me and I went up the stairs. Just as I got up the stairs, I heard the door close. Stepping out into the hallway, I found King and Ginger staring at the guest room door. I knew the dogs would never stop Lizzie from leaving, so something was wrong. As I approached the door, King whined. I scratched his head and then petted Ginger and Bubby. Why is the door closed, Lizzie? Dogs scare me, came from the other side, and then I heard something else. I heard a whisper. Open the door, Lizzie. She didn't answer, and I heard another whisper. Honey, the dogs have had me trapped in here for 3 days now. Why don't you take them out for a walk so I can get out? The dogs didn't really listen to her, but they never treated her like an intruder. They knew she was with me. I instantly became furious because the only thing I could conclude was that someone who didn't belong here was in there with her. Without warning, I kicked the door with all my might. The door flew inward and splinters from the jamb flew through the air. Luckily for Lizzie, she was standing far enough to the side that the door didn't hit her. My best friend was less fortunate. The door hit Jay in the face and knocked him back 3 steps. I flew into a rage and lunged at Jay. He didn't stand a chance because of the door hitting him, and I followed. I turned around and saw Lizzie holding a heavy lamp as if she wanted to hit me with it. When I lowered my eyes, I saw Bubby wedged between us and bared his teeth. King and Ginger had just entered the room with their tails up. Lizzie's face filled with pure fear and she dropped the lamp, and that's when I fully realized the situation. I have things to do, I said as evenly as possible. I'll get to you in a little while. Carrie, things aren't what they seem, baby. Just let me explain. Not what it seems? It looks to me like an open and closed case. Just stay the hell where you are. I considered slapping Jay upside the head, but I wanted to keep him sane in the future. As I left the room, I patted King on the shoulder and said, Security. I didn't know the last time the dogs had eaten, but I figured I'd make it up to them. As I walked down the stairs, I heard Lizzie squealing at me and King growling at her before she retreated back into the guest room. Not far from where I found Lizzie's robe, I found her cell phone. On the couch, I found Jay's clothes, and in his pants pockets, I found his cell phone. I stuffed his clothes into the fireplace and contemplated lighting it. I took both phones into the dining room and plugged them into their chargers. Walking out to the garage, I called Brandy. Carrie, did you get to Houston okay? Yeah, I'm here. I know where Jay is and he'll be in touch with you soon. Thank God he's alive, she said. I bet you won't be so grateful after a while, I thought. Did you get to Denver okay? Yes. When I got here, they started canceling flights to Houston. I'm not surprised. I think I'm the only living soul in Seabrook right now. Even the criminals are fleeing. Be careful, Carrie. I will. We'll talk in a little while. I went to the garage to put up the hurricane shutters, and for some reason I was surprised to see Brandy's Lexus parked on my side next to Lizzie's Sentra. Chicken shit bastard can't even use his own car to chase his wife. My hurricane shutters consisted of half-inch thick plywood that I painted to match the color of the house. The plywood was attached to the sill with a set of metal clamps. These clamps were springy and held the plywood in place, even if the wind managed to somehow get under the wood. They allowed the shutter to simply be pushed back into place. It took longer to move the ladder and get to each window than it did to install each shutter. Taking them down was just as easy. Clamping one of the clamps, you pushed one side of the shutter, pulled the other, and unscrewed the shutter. This could only be done from the outside. After an hour, all the shutters were secured in place on all the windows. While I was installing the shutters on the guest room window, Lizzie tried to open the window to talk to me or push me down the stairs, but since she was standing over me with a lamp, I couldn't be sure. I had one set of shutter locks left to nail the front door shut. But for this set, I had a different plan. I made my way to the kitchen and found a package of steaks in the refrigerator. I guessed that he and Jay were planning to eat steak to replenish their energy after all the work they had been doing. I cooked the whole steak and made myself a cob of corn and a baked potato. While my steak was resting, I cut the rest of the steaks into chunks and put them on 4 bone china plates that Grandma Lizzie had given us as a wedding gift. This china had never been used. It stood in the china cabinet and was dusted off from time to time, but Lizzie always lost her temper if I suggested we use it for food. I also pulled 2 silver spoons from the dresser. Silver, like bone china, was not to be used. I carried the 2 plates upstairs and placed one in front of King and the other in front of Ginger. No, I said, going down to get the other 2 plates. I picked up the other 2 plates and put one for Bubby and one for Lucifer. Lizzie stood there looking horrified. Are those steaks from the refrigerator? Yep. Looks like I made you some appetizers. Oops, I said, heading back down the stairs. I grabbed 2 silver spoons and 2 cans of Alpo. I bought dog food in 3 varieties. I bought large cans of Alpo for the 3 big dogs and Mighty Dog for Lucifer. I also bought 50-pound bags of dry food to keep all 4 of them fed. I opened the Alpos and stuck spoons in the top of the cans. Taking a jug of purified water from the counter, I went back upstairs. The 4 dogs were standing in front of 4 plates filled with steaks, staring at me intently. Lizzie was sitting on the bed, wrapped up in a curtain she had pulled down from the window. She was rubbing a spot on her arm. I couldn't see any blood, so I figured she'd gotten a warning from the dog. I was glad we didn't keep any clothes in the guest room. The dogs kept Lizzie and Jay out of the room, and they couldn't try to hide what they were doing. Her eyes widened when she saw the silver in the cans of dog food. I set the cans on the floor along with the water. I thought you bastards would be hungry, so I brought you some food. Eat up, because we're having a come-to-Jesus' meeting after dinner. You can't be serious. I deserve better than this Carrie guy. Really? You deserve better? Screw you. I deserve a wife and a best friend I can trust. Maybe someday I'll find them. Look, Carrie. I know that I left the room as she began to sob. I looked at the 4 sets of eyes looking at me and said one word. Ciao. I turned on the TV to the Weather Channel. Some guy in a raincoat was talking about the devastation Kate had wrought in the Keys in North Cuba. They were showing a satellite image of a big white donut in the center of the bay. The colored cone on the next slide claimed that with a 90% probability it would hit the Texas coast. Residents of New Orleans fled north, as did residents of the southern neighborhoods surrounding Houston. Before I finished eating, I pulled Jay's cell phone out of the dinette and turned it on. I watched him mimic the upside-down letter J 1,000,000 times to unlock the phone. I saw 3 phone conversations between him and Lizzie the day I flew out. I looked through his messages and found nothing. I did find 4 pictures of Lizzie saved in his photo gallery. I wanted to throw his phone against the wall with all the force I was capable of, but I decided I still needed it. I then turned on Lizzie's phone and found nothing in the call or text message directory. So she erases her phone and he only erases his texts. I looked through her photo gallery. There were no new pictures there? I took a perverse pleasure in watching her phone shatter into hundreds of shards as I hurled it against the stone insert of the fireplace. I finished eating and tossed the plate like a frisbee into the glass front of Lizzie's closet. There was a deafening explosion in the quiet house. "What the hell was that?" shouted Lizzie from the guest room. She repeated it 3 more times before she realized I wasn't answering. I picked up Jay's phone again and looked through his messages. I saw Skype and realized what I was going to do. I called Brandy from my phone and asked if she had Skype. She replied that she did because she and Jay Skype a lot when she has to travel. "Carrie, you sound weird." "What's going on?" "Just get ready to Skype." "I'll call you in a little while." I rushed to the phone and dialed the Skype number. Jay's username popped up right away, and the passwords were childishly simple. I only had to type in pee-pee, poo-poo, and finally boogers before I was online. The phone rang, and then Brandy's puzzled face appeared on the screen. "Carrie? Why do you have Jay's phone?" "Let Jay explain, honey," I said as I walked up the stairs. The dogs were still licking their plates when I got to the door. "Oh, Jay, someone wants to talk to you," I said, turning my phone so that the front camera captured Jay's predicament. Jay and Lizzie were sitting on the bed, eating an Alpo and not looking too happy. "Jay? What the hell is going on? Why are you in there? Why are you bleeding? Did you get mugged or something?" "Liz..." There was a pause as realization came over her. "You, a whore chasing a bastard?" "Baby, I can explain," he said. A mangled lip prevented him from speaking. "Screw you! I don't want to see your cheating ass anymore," Brandy said, breaking into sobs. I backed out of the bedroom and retreated to my bedroom. "Brandy, I need you to listen to me for a minute," I told her. "Why did they do that?" "Why?" she sobbed. "I don't know, but before I run away tomorrow morning, I will." "Can you calm down and we can question them now?" "I have help, so they're a captive audience." I slipped Jay's phone into my shirt pocket and grabbed a chair, which I took to the guest room. Jay stood up abruptly and Bubby growled. Jay quickly sat down. I positioned the chair so I was facing the 2 bastards, pulled out my phone, and pointed it at Jay. "No Carrie," Brandy said from the phone. "Turn the phone so I can look at you." "I don't want to see those 2. I turned the phone around and started. "So, Jay, how long have you been entertaining my wife?" He didn't answer anything. Lizzie was the first to open up. "It started when you were out of town and your toilet broke. You called Jay and asked him to come over and help me. While we were cleaning up, it just sort of happened all by itself." "I understand." "You were cleaning wet tiles, slipped, and accidentally cheated on me. Did I get that right?" "No. It just happened. I felt like shit for weeks. I was so afraid you'd find out somehow. I was embarrassed and excited at the same time. Jay was telling me what a pleasure it is to have fun with someone you're not married to." "Really?" Brandy asked from the phone. "Did you know that this is the 3rd time he's had that pleasure? Did you know that each time he begged me to come back? What's more, he begged me never to tell you, Carrie." "You great piece of shit," I yelled at Jay. "Do you realize how many fights I've been in over the years because you got a high from taking someone else's girl? Did I tell you that after I kicked Jerry May's ass to get him off your back, Jerry and his 5 buddies jumped me at the fair dance that year?" Jay hung his head and Lizzie looked amazed. I had never shared that part of my past with her. I was pretty sure Jay had never told Brandy about it. I caught the look in Brandy's eyes that told me the same thing. "Point me at Lizzie," Brandy ordered. I turned the phone around as she asked, "Bitch, you're lucky I'm not around. You have one of the most expensive men on the planet, and you're entertaining him with my garbage man husband? Carrie might forgive you." She paused, and I saw a twinkle in Lizzie's eyes. "But if I ever see you again, it'll be too soon." "Jay, we're done." "Turn me off, Carrie, I'll call you." I did as she asked. Lizzie cried again. And then something hit me. Just as I was about to say this, Brandy called me on Jay's phone. Sorry, Carrie, I just couldn't look at his ass anymore. By the way, you did a great job on his face. You called just in time to hear another revelation, I said to Brandy. I looked at the couple on the bed. So you promoted me just to get me out of town more often? No. The promotion was legitimate. Lauren appointed you to the position a long time ago. It just took us a while to finalize the logistics. Did you come here and entertain Lizzie every time I left town? Lizzie replied, no. This is the 4th time we've done this, and you've been out of town a few times. So you've entertained my best friend 5 times, and I haven't guessed a thing. 4 times, Jay said, embarrassed. After the first time, it was only when both you and Brandy were out of town. So, I said, trying not to give away my frustration and anger. How many times have I had to leave for some faraway hole so you could come here and entertain my wife? 2 of your last 3 trips have been unnecessary. Even Lauren started to get mad, but I told him you were the one asking for those trips. He paused and looked me in the eye like he'd done so many times before. He usually kissed my ass to keep me from quitting my job. Listen, it was just sex, nothing more, and I'm sorry as hell. I don't know how I can... Shut your weaselly ass up, I yelled. If Brandy hadn't been on the phone, a projectile would have flown into his face. You're goddamn dead to me. As far as I'm concerned, you 2 can entertain each other with your fists until the end of time. I'm done with both of you. I told Brandy I'd call her in a few minutes and hung up. I carried the chair out of the room and looked around. You 2 can sleep here? I'm dead tired and ready for bed. Can't we at least get some clothes? Whined Jay. You've done fine without it, so I guess a few hours won't hurt. Lizzie lifted her head to say something, but I glared at her. I pulled on the broken door, but it wouldn't budge, so I used the storm bolt and front door locks to seal the room. I didn't hear any protests, but Lizzie asked, "Is that really necessary?" Is it really necessary? Obviously, I can't trust you 2, and my dogs need a rest. The 2 of us will discuss it in the morning. I went to my bedroom and just collapsed on the bed. Soon all 4 dogs were snuggled up next to me. I was just starting to doze off when I remembered Brandy. I called her from Jay's cell phone. Are you okay? I asked her. No. No, I'm not okay. Are you? Not at all, I said, holding back the emotions that were trying to spill out of me. She was my world, Brandy. Shh. I know, Carrie, she said as my sobs took over. I was ready to catch him again. I didn't see that either. But you had no idea, so I'm sure it hasn't gotten to you yet. What are you going to do now? I'll leave in the morning. I'm sure I'll end up in jail. Maybe I'll just leave and let those 2 sort themselves out. Take care of yourself, Carrie. Call me when you get a chance. I hung up the phone and forced myself to sleep by an effort of will. I didn't sleep well, but I did fall asleep. When I woke up in the night, I heard the wind howling outside my window. I got up and walked down the stairs to watch TV. As I walked past the guest room, I heard something. I wasn't sure if it was Lizzie crying or what was going on. Honestly, at that point, I didn't care anymore. It didn't matter. I was done with both of them. I guessed that when it came time to get a divorce, Brandy and I could be witnesses for each other to file for adultery. Maybe a deal could be struck that would keep my ass out of jail. I switched the TV and the local news program was showing a peaceful, sunny day. From the voiceover, it was talking about Denver and wildfires were raging in Colorado. It seemed like every time I saw the news about Colorado, either some idiot was shooting people or there was a major forest fire. Then they showed a scene on the beach. The waves were ferocious, and you could see boats being tossed around. The voiceover said the footage was taken in Pensacola, Florida, and the waves were caused by cheating. Treason? Thought I. The woman on TV said T.S. Lizzie was raging on the Gulf Coast. T.S., of course, stands for typical whore. Everybody knows that. They showed a picture of my wife. They said she was bent on destroying men. The guy with the pointer was named Jay. It was just sex, but look who's stupid, he said, when a picture of me in a stupid Alaskan fur coat appeared on the screen. The look on my face was just stupid. They walked back into the studio to a laughing pair of presenters. Her colleague squealed and said, "Can you believe this knucklehead didn't know? I think the next time he goes out of town, I'm going to go and entertain her. This set off another fit of laughter. Just as the presenters were doubling over while holding their bellies, Lizzie appeared on the screen. Hey, baby, I just want you to know it was just sex. The long-o sound continued. I realized the sound was coming from the TV. I fell asleep on the couch with Lucifer curled up in my lap. Ginger and King lay on either side of me, and Bubby nestled in the soft chair. I blinked my eyes and saw the emergency alert symbol on the TV screen. The warning at the bottom said that a mandatory evacuation had been declared in some areas. I watched as the list scrolled alphabetically. I saw Kemah and Nassau on the list and realized Seabrook would be there. I switched to the Weather Channel and saw that Kate was 50 miles off the coast and traveling almost the same path as Ike. They predicted that Kate would make landfall in 4 hours. I realized that I had to act if I wanted to get out alive. I quickly loaded the emergency supplies into my truck along with dog food. I grabbed a duffel bag and folded a large amount of my clothes into it and threw them into the truck. I loaded Lucifer into his doghouse and put it in the truck. We kept $5,000 in cash in a wall safe in case we had to flee, and I left $100 in there. Then I went upstairs to deal with the crooks. They were both asleep. Lizzie was lying on the bed. Jay was asleep at the foot of the bed, covered with a blanket. I knelt down and started shaking Lizzie to wake her up. Lizzie, listen. They've ordered us to evacuate. You and those goddamn psychos are going to have to get your shit together and get out of Dodge. Dodge? What? Where am I supposed to go? Please, Carrie, I promise I'll never have fun with anyone else ever again. Please let us stay together. I giggled. Not exactly what you have to ask. Damn it, Carrie, I love you. I need you. Well, hell, you should have thought about that before you divorced that asshole. It's over between us. I can't even look at you anymore. Well, isn't that great? First mistake I make and Mr. Righteous can't handle it. Look, babe, it was just not better than what we got, but it was good. I'm no more righteous than the other guy, I said, trying to keep my tone even. But I know what it means to leave everyone behind. Do you love me? You have a hell of a weird way of showing it. I saw the wheels turning. I didn't know what she was going to say next. Jay muttered something and sat up. Carrie, look, I'm sorry as hell, Jay cut in. Screw you both, I'm out of here. Good luck, I'll see you when Kate passes. I turned toward the door. I can't believe you're leaving me because of a little indiscretion. Boo boo boo. I've done it to him a few times. Did it hurt you? Did you even notice, for crying out loud? No. The only problem is that you hurt your little male ego. You're twice the man Jay Carey is. Act accordingly. Screw you, I yelled. You know damn well that if you walked in here and saw me having fun with someone else, you'd shit yourself in Technicolor. And you, I said, pointing at Jay. How would you react if you walked in and found me having fun with Brandy? Hey, you want Brandy? Go ahead. Once you get her, you'll understand why I few... Before he could finish his statement, my fist came crashing down on his head. He flopped backwards and scrambled into a corner. Oh, macho man. You're a big tough guy. You hit a defenseless man just because he said something bad about your... You love her. Admit it, asshole. You love her, but you own me. You've probably already entertained her, Lizzie yelled. Lizzie, you don't even know what the hell you're talking about. You have no idea what love is. I'm leaving now. I suggest you assholes do the same. You should take me. I'm your wife. We'll work this out. No, we won't. My wife wouldn't have fun with a classless piece of shit like him. You're just another whore who's been through my life. It's over between us. Here, I've dealt with it. He doesn't mean anything, baby. I love you, not him, she whined. Let him go, Lizzie, Jay intervened. We don't need him. After this is over, you can divorce him and he'll pay for you to stay here and have fun with me every day. He'll go to jail and his goddamn mongrels will go to the shelter. Good luck to you, I said as I left the room. Where am I supposed to go? Please take me with you. My car will never make it. You can't leave me here. Sorry, I only have room for my faithful companions. You'll have to deal with the shit for brains there. You stopped being my problem the moment you let him seduce you. But if you're wise, you'll go to your folks. They'll be safe in Katy. I summoned the dogs to me and headed down the stairs. I could hear Lizzie yelling at Jay, trying to get him to get up and move. By the time I was halfway down the stairs, the noise of the storm had overridden any sounds the bastards might have made. I also noticed a strong odor of gas in the house. I wondered if I should warn those assholes upstairs to keep the lights off, but decided they were adults and would figure it out for themselves. I needed to get the dogs to safety. The neighborhood had already turned into a disaster zone. Roofing materials and pool covers were lying in the street, and branches of large trees were lying everywhere. I saw 3 burning houses and a 4th that looked like a bomb had exploded in it. By the time I got in my car, the wind was starting to roar. I pulled onto the freeway, but there were 3 accidents that hadn't cleared in time, so the highway was impassable. I turned around and headed into the thick of the storm. I was afraid I had waited too long. The wind was driving the rain sideways, and I could barely stay on the road. King's howl came from the back seat. I almost didn't notice the large pecan tree that had fallen into our path until it was too late. The next morning, the cameraman stood at the ready while the makeup artists fancied up the anchorman. "Can I get some sugar in my goddamn coffee?" he asked a girl with a sad face. She ran out of the set to fulfill his request. "I can't believe my grandmother's tree survived the hurricane," the blonde presenter said to no one in particular. "My orange trees got all messed up," the anchor said. "All that debris around is sure to keep the Mexicans from—" He was interrupted by a voice from the booth. "Okay, we're live at 10, 9. The voice interrupted, and the operator held up 5 fingers and started the countdown. "I haven't even gotten to— Good morning, Dallas. I'm Rob Valentine, and with me, as always, is the lovely Caroline Jennings." "It was windy last night, Rob." "Yes, Caroline. As you all know, Hurricane Kate, or the remnants of it, blew through town early this morning and is now wreaking havoc across Missouri and Arkansas." "Caroline?" "Yes, Hurricane Kate is still strong and wreaking havoc across the southeast." "We'll turn to Skip McAllister at the Weather Center for details." "Skip!" The man standing at the green screen suddenly looked fully awake. Moments before, it had seemed as if he had been dozing. "Thank you, Rob." Caroline. "Yes, Kate has returned to tropical storm strength and continues to weaken. But Kate carried the punch, and early this morning, Category 1 winds hit Dallas, damaging trees and roofs. Last night when it hit Galveston and southern Houston neighborhoods, the 150-mile-per-hour winds were already Category 4. Danielle Bridges live in Houston. All monitors show a woman in a raincoat standing among piles of scattered lumber and fallen houses." "Thank you, Skip. As you can see behind me, the devastation is indescribable. Many neighborhoods the authorities won't let anyone into right now." The camera showed a burned-out neighborhood from the helicopter. "We know of at least 4 neighborhoods like the one you see that were destroyed by fire before wind or storm surge even had a chance. Authorities believe they were natural gas explosions, either because of the storm or because people didn't take care to turn off the gas before fleeing the storm. So far, I've been told that only 110 people are reported missing, but authorities will know more when survivors start showing up. Right now, people are scattered everywhere." In the studio, Caroline had time to stop checking her face in the mirror when the camera aimed at her turned on. "This is so sad. We are praying for the people of Houston today." Rob looked up and said, "More news. 3 weeks after Kate's death." Poor man. Renee didn't need to ask who Linda meant. Carrie McDowell stood over the plaque that would adorn Lizzie's final resting place, even though Lizzie's body had not yet been found. "Didn't they bury Jay yesterday?" Renee's father asked. "Yes, and today he's burying Lizzie. Someone said his dogs were the only thing keeping him alive." After the service, people gathered at Carrie's parents' house. Carrie moved in with them after returning from his grandfather's cabin near San Antonio. His home was completely destroyed. A gas explosion had destroyed the house and neighboring homes before the storm surge flooded the neighborhood. Renee found Carrie sitting on the back porch looking up at the sky. It was overcast and threatening rain. "If you need someone, I'll be right here for you," she told him. He looked at her and gave her a half smile. "Thank you, Renee. You've been more than wonderful. You know, I should be like that. My brother is too afraid of making mistakes with people. He knows you're hurting and he can't help it." I know he loves me too. Carrie took a deep breath and looked at Renee. She cheated on me, you know. I found out just before I got back to Houston. Oh, Carrie. Are you sure? I'm sure. She sent the pictures to my cell phone. How does that prove she cheated? Most guys like that kind of thing. Not when she calls you by another guy's name and mentions that her husband won't be back for 3 days. Oh, Carrie. I'm so sorry, she said, starting to cry. So you know who? Yes. His funeral was yesterday. Jay? She asked, surprised. Lizzie was having fun with Jay? For a while, Carrie was silent. He seemed to be struggling to find the words and losing the battle to hold back the tears. Terry said they found her car, but no body. Yeah. They said they found some empty cars. Too many people didn't leave when they were told. Brandy knew? Yeah, sort of. She knew he was cheating on her, but she didn't know with whom. I talked to her when I was in San Antonio. She's going to move to LA. She has family there, there's a job opening at her company, and she wants to get away from everything that's going on here. When I get the insurance money, she's going to sell me her house. He himself didn't know why he wasn't being truthful about how he found out about Lizzie's infidelity. He told himself that the cell phone story made him look less foolish. For weeks, he had been alternately feeling guilty for not taking Jay and Lizzie with him, and feeling stupid about the affair happening under his nose. He knew they had plenty of time to get to her parents' house. He'd traveled 10 miles and back, and it had all worked out. They had an easier escape route. He suspected they might have been in the house when it exploded. You know what the saddest part is? If she were coming through the gate right now, I don't know that I wouldn't take her back. I loved her with all my heart, he sobbed. I'd die for her, so I don't see how she could do that to me. Of course, he snorted. You could say I'd take her back, since I'm sure she'd be out of bounds now. I told her parents she wasn't here when I got home and figured she'd already left for San Antonio. Her father blames me, even though they haven't been able to contact her for days either. Carrie sighed and looked at Renee. I let your brother down, you know that. A puzzled expression appeared on Renee's face. You let Terry down? How? Do you remember the barbecue for your birthday? She nodded, and he continued. You said that night that Terry invited me there to find a good woman. I found Lizzie, and now I realize it wasn't that good. So I failed. No, Renee said. I remember that conversation well. I told you that he invited you there to find a good woman. And all you did was stare at Lizzie and ignore the good woman. Carrie McDowell, I've spent my whole life trying to get your attention. She paused and looked up at the darkening sky. She had no idea I wanted you. I didn't know she was into you until the day before my party. I had planned to meet you the Tuesday before the party and invite you. I knew you'd find a reason not to go, so I was going to make you do it the following weekend. Carrie sat stunned for a few minutes, then put his arm around Renee's shoulders. Can you find it in your heart to forgive a fool? No, but I've always loved you, Carrie. That will never change. You're not a fool, and there's nothing to forgive you, even if you are a little retarded. So what's going to happen now? Asked Carrie. Oh, I'm going to try to make a life with my new boyfriend. Oh, Carrie said dejectedly. Hopefully he'll treat you well and make you happy. I'm sure he will, Carrie. He's a great guy, even if he is a little slow. 4 weeks after Kate, the detectives who arrived on the scene looked like they stepped out of a slapstick buddy cop movie. Detective Willis was tall, black, and bald. Detective Lewis was short, fat, and white. They had been partners for over a decade. The young patrol cop gestured for them to approach him. Officer Dane? Lewis asked. The young policeman nodded. What do we have here? Detective, the rescue team found these 2 bodies by the trees, and I thought you might want to take a look at them. I haven't called forensics yet because I got in trouble last time. Oh, yeah? I heard about that. You called CSI to a drowned woman in a car, Willis said. I didn't hear about that, Lewis said. Yeah, that was a week ago. Forensics determined at a glance that she was a hurricane victim and read Officer Dane the riot act. Lewis grinned. Wouldn't want to be a rookie after a major disaster. Kid, we'll be finding bodies for a month. You did the right thing to call us. They followed the young officer into a grove of dead trees. Detective Willis took a few pictures and said, "Call in the rescue team, Officer Dane. These two died in the storm. See the swelling? That's from the water. Their DNA will tell us where to put the bodies. I bet they were in that little Nissan we found last week. It was only a few hundred yards from here." "They could have been from that burned-out neighborhood too," Will said. The officer walked back to his patrol car, and Willis and Lewis walked back to their unmarked sedan. "You know, Tom," Lewis said, "now's as good a time as any to get away with this." "You're right, Dave. I've wondered several times how many bodies were dumped here after the evacuation order was given. Too bad we don't have the time or resources to examine every body we find." "Yeah, that's right. Hey, it's lunchtime. Is there anything open around here?" Epilogue. 6 years later. The setting sun fades quickly when you're in the valley. 2 weeks had taught me that if I wanted to get back to the cabin before dark, I needed to reel in the rods now. This was my third fishing trip to Alaska since I had been here before Hurricane Kate. The only other time I was here was for work. Yeah, Lauren begged me to stay and made it so I couldn't help but stay. He'd appointed Norman Childs to Jay's old position, and Norman didn't like his managers leaving, so he drastically limited our travel. I didn't complain one bit about this move. About 3 weeks after her official funeral, I got word from the coroner's office that Lizzie's body had been found. They say it's good when it's finalized, but for me, it just opened up all my wounds. Her parents and I had a private service when we buried her ashes. I never told them about Lizzie's adventures. I decided to let them remember her the way I wanted them to. I believe they found Jay's body as well, but since his parents had died and Brandy had gone west, they had no one to notify. Brandy and I maintained a semblance of his first service and agreed to keep in touch. She found a good man named Charlie. I haven't seen her since we closed on the sale of her house, but she seems happy. She keeps hinting that I should come to LA and see her, but I'm hesitant yet. I stop at my post, whistle, and 3 dogs come running. They are never more than 100 feet away from me. King gets to me first, followed by Ginger. Sadly, Bubby died 2 years ago. About a month after I laid him to rest, a pit bull puppy showed up at my door. After weeks of ads and flyers with no owners, I got Jessie. While King and Ginger acted quickly, Jessie and Lucifer were slow. So with dogs in tow and tackle box in hand, I set out on the trail. Moments after entering the clearing that the cabin occupied, I heard a squeal heralding the approach of a 5-year-old. "Daddy!" I managed to drop my gear and catch Danny in mid-flight. "Daddy, Mommy's making hamburgers now, let's go eat," he said to me with the sense of urgency that only a growing boy can bring to dinner. My son hugged me and then ran to the booth. The 4 canines ran after him, leaving me to gather my gear. I entered the cabin and was greeted by the smell of meat and a juicy kiss from my wife. My 2-year-old daughter Jenna came running in with her arms held high. She too was waiting for hugs and kisses. "I didn't think you'd catch anything, so I started making burgers," Renee said with a smile. "Well, I guess we'll just eat 6 fish on my fishing rod tomorrow." I sold the house I bought from Brandy. It had too many memories of Lizzie and Jay in it. I lived in that house long enough to sell it, and then Renee and I bought a house in Baytown. The house had weathered 2 major storms, so I didn't have much to worry about. Lizzie and I never got around to having kids, and Renee never found the right guy. We decided that after my son or daughter was born, if Renee wanted to, we would not have any more children. Shortly after giving birth, I would have a vasectomy. We finally had the happy family we both dreamed of, albeit with the delay caused by someone not having a baby in time. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.